Among history's most remarkable figures, Empress Elisabeth of Austria, known as Sisi, was born on December 24, 1837, in Munich, Germany. She was the third child and second daughter of Duke Maximilian Joseph of Bavaria and Princess Ludovica of Bavaria. Elizabeth, known to her family as Sisi, grew up in a relaxed, informal environment at Possenhofen Castle during the summer and the Herzog Max Palais in Munich during winter. Her father, a lover of circuses, often escaped his royal duties, allowing the children to have a carefree childhood. Sisi's early life was marked by a lack of formal structure, and she spent much of her time riding horses and exploring the countryside rather than attending lessons. She was introverted by nature and struggled with the more rigid and formal court life that came with her later marriage to Franz Joseph I, Emperor of Austria. Her early years were filled with freedom and simplicity, but this all changed when she married Franz Joseph at the age of 16. The marriage thrust her into a much more formal and demanding world, one that she would find difficult to navigate. At the age of 16, Elizabeth married Franz Joseph I, Emperor of Austria, on April 24, 1854. The marriage was arranged by her ambitious mother-in-law, Archduchess Sophie, who hoped to secure a suitable wife for her son. However, Elizabeth, known for her free-spirited nature, was unprepared for the strict and formal life at the Habsburg court. She struggled with the rigid protocols and courtly etiquette, which made her feel suffocated and out of place. In the early days of their marriage, Elizabeth's relationship with Franz Joseph's mother, Archduchess Sophie, was difficult. Sophie took control of Elizabeth's children, often undermining her authority as a mother. Elizabeth, who had hoped to raise her children herself, found herself distanced from her role as a mother. She was also under immense pressure to provide a male heir to the throne, which caused her much stress and anxiety. Despite the challenges, the birth of her son, Rudolf, in August 1858, improved her standing at court. However, Elizabeth's health began to suffer under the strain. She experienced frequent illnesses and was often in poor health, which caused her to seek refuge outside the formal court. Elizabeth developed a strong affinity for Hungary, where the atmosphere was more relaxed, and she would often visit the country to escape her duties in Austria. During her early years as Empress, Elizabeth developed a deep connection with Hungary, a relationship that would greatly influence her actions within the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Her first visit to Hungary in 1857 left a lasting impression on her, and she began to feel a sense of kinship with the Hungarian people. Unlike the more stifling court life in Austria, Hungary offered Elizabeth a more relaxed and welcoming environment, where she could interact freely with the people and feel appreciated. Elizabeth's emotional bond with Hungary grew stronger over time. She learned Hungarian and became a passionate advocate for the country's autonomy within the empire. She believed that Hungary should be given more political power, and this advocacy played a key role in the establishment of the Austro-Hungarian dual monarchy in 1867. Elizabeth worked alongside Hungarian leaders to bring about this political compromise, which allowed Hungary to share equal status with Austria within the empire. Her political engagement with Hungary also allowed her to assert herself more at court, as she began to exert influence over her husband, Franz Joseph I, in matters relating to Hungary. However, her involvement in Hungarian politics was not without controversy, as her actions sometimes conflicted with the more conservative views of the Austrian court. Despite these challenges, Elizabeth remained dedicated to her Hungarian cause, and her efforts were recognized by the Hungarian people, who adored her for her support. The death of Elizabeth's second daughter, Sophie, in 1857, was a devastating blow to the Empress, marking a turning point in her emotional well-being. Sophie, only 2 years old, succumbed to what was likely typhus, a tragic loss that Elizabeth struggled to cope with. Sophie's death not only deepened Elizabeth's existing depression, but also created a rift between her and her surviving daughter, Gisela. Elizabeth became emotionally distant from her family, especially from her children, a behavior that persisted in the years to come. In the wake of Sophie's passing, Elizabeth's grief became more pronounced. Her intense sorrow was compounded by her feelings of guilt and inadequacy as a mother. The loss of Sophie was especially painful because Elizabeth had been unable to provide the motherly care that she wanted, as her mother-in-law had taken over the upbringing of her children. This emotional turmoil led Elizabeth to withdraw even further into herself, seeking solace in solitary travel and increasingly neglecting her royal duties. The tragedy also exacerbated Elizabeth's health issues. Her mental anguish manifested physically, as she became even more preoccupied with her health and appearance. Elizabeth's obsessive concern with maintaining her youthful figure led her to adopt restrictive diets and extreme exercise regimens, which only added to her physical exhaustion. Despite her efforts to appear composed and graceful, her grief over Sophie's death cast a long shadow over her life, influencing her actions and mindset for years to come. Elizabeth's physical and mental health began to deteriorate following the death of her daughter Sophie. Her emotional distress triggered a series of health problems, including nervous attacks and bouts of severe coughing. Elizabeth's anxiety was compounded by the pressures of court life, which she found stifling and isolating. Her frequent illnesses were likely exacerbated by the stress of navigating the rigid Habsburg court, which led her to seek relief in various forms. In an effort to improve her health, Elizabeth took frequent breaks from Vienna, often escaping to the more relaxed and informal environment of Hungary. These retreats offered her a welcome respite from her royal duties and the suffocating atmosphere at court. During her visits to Hungary, Elizabeth found solace in the country's more laid-back lifestyle, which helped ease her mental burden. She also spent time in the Mediterranean, where she hoped the warmer climate would improve her physical condition. Despite these efforts, Elizabeth's health continued to decline. She became obsessed with maintaining her physical appearance, particularly her figure, and subjected herself to extreme dieting and tight lacing to achieve her ideal look. Her obsession with beauty and weight control further drained her energy and aggravated her existing health issues. Nevertheless, her frequent travels and periods of isolation from the court became a way for her to cope with the overwhelming demands of her position as Empress. Elizabeth's need for physical and emotional escape would become a recurring theme throughout her life, and her struggles with mental and physical health would continue to shape her identity as Empress. Elizabeth's political engagement with Hungary reached its pinnacle in 1867 when the Austro-Hungarian Compromise was signed, creating the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary. This event marked a significant shift in the balance of power within the empire, and Elizabeth played a pivotal role in supporting the Hungarian cause. Her advocacy for Hungarian independence and her personal connection to the country made her an ideal mediator between Hungary and Austria. The creation of the dual monarchy granted Hungary equal status with Austria within the empire, and Elizabeth was crowned Queen of Hungary alongside her husband, Franz Joseph I. The coronation, held in June 1867, was a momentous event that solidified Elizabeth's political influence and strengthened her bond with Hungary. Despite the challenges she faced in her personal life, Elizabeth's role in this political achievement earned her the admiration of the Hungarian people, who revered her as a symbol of their national pride. Elizabeth's involvement in the creation of the dual monarchy was not only a political maneuver, but also a deeply personal commitment. She believed in the importance of a harmonious relationship between Austria and Hungary, and her support of Hungary's independence was a reflection of her growing affection for the country and its people. This political success also provided Elizabeth with a sense of purpose and accomplishment, helping to alleviate some of the emotional struggles she faced in her personal life. However, her efforts to reconcile the two nations were not without tension, and Elizabeth's role as a mediator between the two empires would continue to influence her actions and political decisions throughout her life. The tragic death of Elizabeth's only son, Crown Prince Rudolf, in 1889, was one of the most devastating events of her life. Rudolf was found dead alongside his mistress, Baroness Mary Vetsera, in what was later known as the Meierling Incident, a suspected murder-suicide. The circumstances surrounding their deaths remain mysterious and have been the subject of speculation for years. For Elizabeth, the loss of her son was not just a personal tragedy, but also a political blow, as Rudolf had been the heir to the throne. Rudolf's death sent Elizabeth into a profound state of grief from which she would never fully recover. Her emotional distress worsened, and she became increasingly withdrawn. The once strong bond between Elizabeth and her husband, Franz Joseph I, began to fray, as she blamed him for not preventing the tragedy and for their inability to protect their son from his personal struggles. Elizabeth's mourning for Rudolf was all-consuming, and she rarely left her home after the incident. The Meierling incident also affected Elizabeth's public image, as rumors swirled about the nature of her son's death and her emotional state. While some speculated that the young couple's deaths were politically motivated, others suggested that Rudolf had been emotionally unstable, which ultimately led to the tragic outcome. Elizabeth, who had always been an emotionally complex figure, now faced a period of intense personal and public scrutiny. The loss of Rudolf marked a turning point in Elizabeth's life. She withdrew from court duties and retreated into a life of travel and solitude, seeking to escape the overwhelming pain and responsibility that came with her position. After the death of her son, Crown Prince Rudolf, Elizabeth's emotional state deteriorated, and she began to withdraw from her royal duties. The pain of losing her son, coupled with her increasingly strained relationship with her husband, Franz Joseph I, led Elizabeth to seek refuge in travel. She became more reclusive, spending long periods away from the imperial court in Vienna. This marked the beginning of her extensive travels across Europe and beyond, a pattern that would define the later years of her life. Elizabeth's travels provided her with a means of escaping the pressures of court life and the personal anguish she endured. She visited places such as the Mediterranean, Greece, and various parts of Hungary, always seeking solitude and freedom from her responsibilities. She often traveled incognito, using the pseudonym Countess of Hohenems in an effort to avoid the public eye. Her journey to the Greek island of Corfu led to the creation of the Achillean Palace, a private retreat that reflected her love for classical mythology and the heroism of Achilles. Although Elizabeth's travels gave her some respite, they also further distanced her from her family and her duties as empress. She grew increasingly detached from the court and her role within the empire. Her husband, Franz Joseph, was deeply concerned by her absences and the emotional toll they took on her, but Elizabeth remained steadfast in her desire for solitude. Despite her withdrawals, Elizabeth's presence and influence remained significant, especially in Hungary, where she continued to be revered as a symbol of national pride. Throughout her life, Elizabeth was obsessed with maintaining her beauty and youthful appearance. She developed an intense physical regimen that included strict diets, extreme exercise routines, and elaborate beauty rituals. Elizabeth's dedication to maintaining her figure was extreme. She often adhered to a fasting cure that involved consuming minimal food to stay slender. She also practiced tight lacing, wearing corsets that were so tightly fastened that they significantly reduced her waist size. These efforts to achieve an almost impossible standard of beauty were central to Elizabeth's sense of identity. Her exercise regimen was equally demanding. Every residence she lived in was equipped with a gymnasium, and she spent hours each day working out, practicing gymnastics, and riding horses. As she grew older and could no longer endure the long hours on horseback due to sciatica, she turned to walking, embarking on long, high-speed walking tours to stay fit. Elizabeth's physical activities were not just about maintaining her appearance. They were also a way for her to control aspects of her life and escape the constraints of her royal duties. Elizabeth's beauty routines were equally rigorous. She spent hours grooming her long, dark blonde hair, which became a signature feature of her appearance. Her hairdresser was required to follow a strict protocol, and Elisabeth herself would inspect the hair that fell out after each session. She also used a variety of beauty products, such as crème céleste, to keep her skin looking youthful. Despite the toll this obsessive routine took on her health, including contributing to her later physical decline, Elisabeth remained steadfast in her pursuit of beauty, which she valued above all else. In the final years of her life, Elisabeth's emotional and physical health continued to decline. The cumulative toll of her personal losses, including the deaths of her son Rudolf and her other close relatives, left her deeply affected. Elisabeth became increasingly withdrawn, retreating further into her own world, away from the responsibilities of her royal duties. Her previously active lifestyle of travel and self-imposed isolation became her primary means of coping, but it did little to alleviate her growing emotional distress. Her obsessive desire to maintain her beauty and youthfulness intensified during this period, but the effects of her extreme regimens began to take a noticeable toll on her health. Elisabeth's weight continued to drop, and her physical condition worsened as she aged. She had become emaciated and fragile, and her health issues, including sciatica and other physical ailments, only added to her suffering. Despite this, she remained deeply committed to her beauty routines, often spending hours grooming her long hair and adhering to her restrictive diets. Emotionally, Elisabeth became more melancholic and distant. Her grief over the loss of her son Rudolf remained unresolved, and she struggled to find peace. Her relationship with her husband, Franz Joseph, had become one of mutual respect but emotional distance, as their differing personalities and Elisabeth's emotional turmoil kept them apart. As her sense of isolation grew, Elisabeth's only solace came from her poetry and her intellectual pursuits, which allowed her to express her innermost feelings. Her final years were marked by a deepening sadness, and the empress who once captivated Europe with her beauty and grace became a reclusive figure, burdened by the weight of her own personal demons. On September 10, 1898, Elisabeth's life came to a tragic and sudden end when she was assassinated by the Italian anarchist Luigi Lucheni in Geneva, Switzerland. Elisabeth, traveling incognito under the pseudonym Countess of Hohenems, was walking with her lady-in-waiting, Countess Irma Star-Eye, along the promenade near Lake Geneva. Lucheni, who had originally intended to kill the Duke of Orleans, chose Elisabeth as his target after learning of her presence in the city. He attacked her with a sharpened needle file, stabbing her in the chest. Despite the severity of the wound, Elisabeth initially appeared to be unharmed, and the two women continued walking toward the steamship Geneva, unaware of the danger. It was only when Elisabeth collapsed, moments later, that Countess Star-Eye realized the gravity of the situation. Although Elisabeth revived briefly after being helped aboard the ship, she soon lost consciousness again. Medical assistance was limited, and Elisabeth was unable to recover. She was carried back to her hotel, where she was declared dead at 2:10 in the afternoon. The assassination shocked the world and sent Austria into mourning. Elisabeth, once revered for her beauty and grace, was now mourned not only as an empress, but as a tragic figure. Her death was especially poignant, as she had spent her final years in emotional isolation, far from the imperial duties that had once defined her life. The circumstances of her assassination highlighted the political unrest of the time, as Lucheni claimed that his attack was an act of propaganda against monarchy. The assassination of Empress Elisabeth left a profound impact on both the Habsburg Empire and the world. The news of her death quickly spread, sending waves of grief across Austria and Hungary, where she had been deeply loved. Elisabeth's funeral procession was attended by numerous sovereigns and dignitaries from around the world, emphasizing the magnitude of her legacy. Her body was returned to Vienna, where she was laid to rest in the imperial crypt beside her husband, Emperor Franz Joseph, and their son, Crown Prince Rudolf. Elizabeth's death led to a wave of public sympathy and admiration for the Empress, particularly in Hungary, where her efforts to secure the dual monarchy were remembered fondly. Statues and memorials dedicated to her were erected in various places, including Vienna, Geneva, and even in Hungary. Her influence continued to be felt long after her death, as she had been seen as a symbol of beauty, grace, and political diplomacy. Elizabeth's legacy was also marked by her personal struggles, which humanized her in the eyes of many. Her obsession with beauty and her struggles with mental health resonated with countless individuals who saw her as a figure caught between public duty and personal turmoil. She remains a compelling figure in history, admired not only for her role as Empress, but also for her resilience in the face of personal tragedy. What do you think about Elizabeth's legacy and her profound impact on both the monarchy and the public? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating stories from history. Thank you very much for watching.